Joining me now is Scott Reid, our CTV News political commentator. Scott, thanks as always for joining us.
Morning, Roger.
A busy couple of weeks ahead politically. Let's talk a little bit about those two by-elections before we get to the retreat, the caucus retreat. Montreal, we've got David Lametti, who stepped down, the NDP running a city councillor there, and out in Winnipeg and Elmwood, Transcona, the Conservatives are gunning for the Liberals there. So they really have their backs to the wall, don't they?
And no question. And I mean, when we put it in the context of last week's actions by the NDP, Jagmeet Singh choosing to walk away from that parliamentary agreement with the Liberals, one of the things that will be really interesting sort of subplot for these by-elections are, do both the Liberals and the NDP end up punished? Do we see the Liberals lose a safe Liberal riding in Montreal and the New Democrats lose an extremely safe, and by the way, historically significant former seat of Bill Blaikie? They lose that seat in Winnipeg. That would be a real pain sandwich for both the Liberals and the NDP. Liberals may hang on the Salimard. It does look like a three-way race. One thing we can say for certain is we know zero for certain because by-election races are unpredictable. You guys have mentioned this got 91 candidates. It looks like it's a three-way fight between three different parties, but there's no debating the fact that if the Liberals were to lose, on top of having lost that Toronto St. Paul's by-election at the beginning of the summer, it would be a real dirty dose of news.
Okay, well, we'll have to see what happens. We've got a week to wait for that, but we don't have a week to wait for the retreat for the caucus, the Liberal caucus. Now, the cabinet retreat was all love, or maybe what it was presented as love. Are the gloves off for it?
I don't think so. It's going to be one of the things you have to watch for. I mean, you look at the Liberals, according to one poll last week, they hit 21%. That is a low of lows. That is the kind of number they've only seen once in their history when Michael Ignatieff took them absolutely into the wood chipper. So there's no question the ingredients for caucus dissatisfaction are there, but we've not really seen it. And I don't think we're going to see any particular kind of leadership push on the Prime Minister. I don't think you're going to see his leadership challenge. We'll watch for signs of that. I think the really interesting thing is, how does the Prime Minister and his office navigate this gathering? Because we've had an entire summer of nothing, no reaction, no adjustment, no alteration, even as they lose by-elections, even as the polls show them far behind, and even as the NDP walk away from this political deal, which preserves them from the threat of an election. The Liberals have effectively peddled the same message and said to people, stay steady. But no one wants to stay steady at 21%. No one wants to stay steady far behind Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. So can the Prime Minister thread the needle of not saying something fundamentally different, but giving Liberals a reason to hope? It's a tall order, man.
And with the NDP walking away, does that change the dynamics of this caucus retreat at all?
I think it does. It'll give them some housekeeping stuff to focus on. Look, I lived through a minority government. I cannot tell you. It seems uninteresting and mundane to people, but the sheer pressure of the mechanics and the dynamics of a minority parliament. You have to count every head. Nobody can take a trip without knowing, making certain that you don't get surprised in the House with people springing out behind the curtain, managing and navigating potential confidence votes. What will the Liberals do? There's rumors they may think about having a prorogation and bring forward a new legislative agenda. How would they do that, knowing they then have to face a confidence vote? So would they have to strike a deal with the NDP on that vote? What might the NDP ask for? Could that unleash dynamics that could see this thing go sideways and force you an election? It's just, there's peril everywhere when you're in a minority parliament, and frankly, when you're in a weak position, which at 21% the Liberals are.
It sounds like fun. Now, could we see a snap election if the Liberals lose both of these by-elections?
I don't think so. If the premise of the question is the Prime Minister said, I've had enough, let's test the confidence of the people by going to the polls. The loss of these by-elections, the one in June, and then if this were to happen in La Salle-Mard now, the lesson would not be, well, we need to see what more voters have to say. The lesson would be, we need time, we need to figure out how to regroup. But again, the consistent message of the summer has been the Liberals recognize there's potential options for change, but they don't find any of them palatable. I mean, the Prime Minister could leave. That's a brand of change. He says he doesn't want to. They could dump the consumer carbon tax. They say they don't want to. They could do a massive cabinet shuffle. They could take Mark Carney, who's rumored to be coming to the cabinet retreat to speak, and put him into finance. They say they don't want to. So, they need to make changes because where they're at means certain electoral defeat, but the options for change seem unpalatable.
But could we see it from the other side with the NDP or the Conservatives? I mean, the Conservatives have been pushing for an election. Would this be enough for the NDP to even maybe take advantage of that with 2 losses?
I think unlikely, but the challenge is now ever present. Now that that shield of the parliamentary agreement is gone, the threat is ever present now that things could spiral out of control. Weird things happen in a minority government. You start to have a conversation around the fall economic statement, maybe a throne speech, maybe next year's budget, and suddenly people get their nose out of joint. And it might seem ridiculous to us, but people can act against their own interest. They can start to get upset. It can take you to strange places and strange outcomes. All things being considered, the NDP have the same problem that the Liberals have. If the Liberals are in trouble because they're at 21%, well, then the NDP are even deeper trouble because they're at 19. And if they lose this election in Winnipeg, they're obviously not going to want to test the will of the people. But they do want to position themselves as opposing the government. So how Jagmeet Singh is going to walk that line is going to be very difficult to see. But look, none of the Liberals or the NDP can afford an election right now. The truth of the matter is they need time and hope to rebuild.
All right, Scott, thank you as always for your insight.
Thanks, Roger.
Scott Reid is our CTV News political commentator.